You know, ever since Trump started showing his true colors, I don't know if it's just me, but I've noticed a surge in videos of palm color people speaking out, realizing for the first time that we all have been played. Now they are confronting the uncomfortable truth that the history they've been taught has been deliberately twisted. Now, this awakening is not just about understanding the past, but about recognizing why so many palm color politicians are now verbally attacking real history. They're afraid of the truth being exposed because it challenges the narrative they've worked so hard to protect. Now, in this video, palm color voices are stepping up to confront the uncomfortable truths of Black history. As more and more people recognize how they've been misled, we are hearing from those who are breaking the silence and speaking out about the truths they've always known. From the atrocities committed by slave owners to the erasure of the enslaved people's agency in their own liberation, they are being forced to reckon with a history that's been hidden from them for far too long. So with that said, join me as we unpack why teaching an accurate, unfiltered history isn't just about sparing feelings, but about the truth that can no longer be ignored. So with that said, let's take a look at these videos as they finally speak out. I will be right back.
Accurate history is teaching white Americans how white slave owners beat, humiliated, mutilated, brutalized their slaves. Accurate history is teaching that George Washington's false teeth were made out of his slaves' teeth. Accurate history is teaching that Abraham Lincoln may have said some words and signed some, but he did not physically do anything to free the slaves. The white abolitionists also often get almost total credit for freeing the slaves. I bet you've never even asked yourself what the slaves were doing to free themselves, and the answer to that is most of the work, including giving the ultimatum of war. But then we get a bunch of white people mad that their kids might feel guilty if we teach real history. It's not about your white child's feelings. Teaching accurate history isn't about white people's feelings. But that does sound like something that someone who's only ever been taught a white glorifying version of history would counter with. Ask why we ever felt like we needed to curate a false version of what white people did and did not do to Black people to begin with. And then ask yourself why white politicians are verbally attacking real history by calling it slurs, which is by default also the act of calling Black people slurs.
What could have spared so much violence in America is if we hadn't taught children, including myself, that war and violence is a way to get what you believe that you deserve, while also minimizing how violent we were towards the people who were here before us. When you take away the cruelty but teach the violence and glorify the violence, you get a violent country. You get people who are readily willing to be violent to get what they believe is justly owed to them. We should have taught the truth about what exactly we did hundreds of years ago, but we didn't. Therefore, teaching it over and over and over again as a triumphant thing, thereby glorifying every violent act this nation has committed. And all I have to say is that you get exactly what you teach.
You know why it's so hard for a lot of white people to admit our complicity and active hand and understand that systemic is real? Here's one of the reasons. Because if you as a white person begin to understand and believe that, that means your mom and dad were wrong. Your grandparents were wrong. Your teachers were wrong. Everything you've learned about history is wrong. You've heard about cops is wrong. The entire foundation of this country that you know it to be, that has been taught to you, you will realize you were lied to. Everything you know about the criminal justice system, schools, banks, credit, food deserts, the medical field, the mental health field, you're going to realize everything that you were taught about that. If you've never addressed what you're going to understand internally If you start to unpack that, all it was wrong. You've been lied to. This is why so many white people want to return to this perceived right to comfort, because it creates an internal panic. When you realize your entire foundation was formed and created and uplifted upon lies, supremacy, white violence, dehumanization, you're going to deconstruct all of that if you choose to. And what you're going to be left with is yourself. And then you have to understand, I have to understand the complicity in the active hand in the role that I carry out in supremacy. And instead of saying, holy dude, I was wrong about everything. Everything was a lie. Everything, race really does play into everything. Instead of doing that, the gut reaction is to push back against people who have the Black, Indigenous people, persons of color experience in this country, to push back against them and tell them that they don't know their history, that their life experience is wrong. You see how that's not logical at all? I always say, once you start pulling the string on the sweater, everything unravels. And that leads to an identity crisis, which will force you back into being comfortable so you don't have to address yourself, so you don't have to address your family members, so you don't have to address your friends or your churches. Or it will cause you to radically change to a point where you might lose everything, but will find your humanity instead. Choose your humanity. Choose to walk away from whiteness forever.
Fuck this election up big time. The Black community, to the vast majority, understood the assignment, and white people, just like always, came in and this thing sideways. And when you look at all the things that Donald Trump has been peeling back, it is extremely, extremely concerning what he has done in just a few short days. And I saw a few Black creators on this app say, you know, it's up to the white people now. Like, white people are the ones who, we're not going to be affected by Donald Trump stuff. He's going to work to make our lives better at the expense of making everybody else's life worse. And I hope there are enough white people out there that feel like me that is not acceptable. That is not acceptable. We have to say something. We have to do something. We have to use our voices in a positive way to combat Donald Trump and all of his draconian policies that are going to send us back into the Stone Age.
I'm an extremely privileged white woman, and I often find myself in spaces where I am the least educated and the least rich of all of those people in the room, and they are predominantly Black spaces, and I want to talk to you about it. This privilege comes via proximity to my husband. He is an associate at one of the premier civil rights firms in the country. You don't know their name, but you do know their cases, I promise. And last night we went to a gala honoring one of the partners in his firm getting an award. And in that gala, it was a very eye-opening space. I have experienced a lot of grief, a lot of anger, a lot of big, big feelings this week. And I think they're very justified big feelings. But in that room, they opened with the acknowledgement of the grief that a lot of those people were feeling. And no, Black people are not a monolith, but Black people have every right to see me as part of the white monolith, and that's fair. That said, I had the opportunity to listen to one of the leaders of the ACLU give her speech while she was accepting her award, and she talked about how this is not her first president, this is not the ACLU's first rodeo, and they are doing the continual work to ensure our civil rights. Now is not the time to feel hopeless, now is the time to get up and participate in the fight.
I'm getting tired of white people being offended for minorities. Hey y'all, I noticed something just now in my video about calling all men brothers, no matter African American, Hispanic, Asian, or whatever. I noticed that the white people in the video, in the comments, are trying to be offended for the minorities, or the African American people is what the video is about. And I'm getting tired of white people being offended for minorities when the minorities are saying it's okay to do what I'm doing, but then the white people tell me not to. That's part of the problem. That is part of the problem. You're the same people that won't probably go out and meet them and hang out with everybody. See, I will. And I'm going to stand right beside them, and I'm going to fight against hate, and I'm going to fight against, but I'm not going to be offended for them because I have no idea the pain and the suffering they've been through. So I will stand next to them. I will not stand behind them, and I'll not stand in front of them. I'm beside them.
I don't know what it's like to be a woman of color, but I do know that if I were a woman of color, my number one thing, like no-brainer, would be that I would have no white women friends. Because one, the odds of that white woman being like a good person are low. The odds are against you because she's probably going to be a supremacist. She's probably going to be at least minimally, and at the very, very least, she's going to most likely tie herself to white men above all else, like above other women. Two, the amount of weaponization of emotion that I see just from white women on this app is crazy. The amount of times that I have seen, like, you made me feel sad and therefore that's bad. Oh, that made me feel weird and therefore the law is that is bad. Like, it is so weird how they have decided that their emotion is law, and also just their desire, our desire to speak opinion that you know nothing about. Like, why is your opinion about Beyonce's Grammy so big? Like, because it didn't affect you and therefore it doesn't affect anyone because your feelings are law? And like the halftime performance I've seen, it's so annoying. Like,
Now, talking about palm color politicians verbally attacking real history by calling it slayers. In the initial days of Trump's second term, we have seen him issuing several executive orders seeking to control how schools teach about race and gender, direct more tax dollars to private schools, and deport pro-Palestinian protesters. And on January 29, 2025, he signed the Ending Radical Indoctrination in K-12 Schooling Executive Order, which mandates the elimination of curricula that the administration deems as promoting radical anti-American ideologies. Now, this executive order is not just an attack on critical race theory or teachings about systemic racism. It is a cornerstone of an authoritarian ideology designed to eliminate critical thought, suppress historical truth, and strip educators of their autonomy. Now, under the guise of combating divisiveness, it advances a broader war on education as a democratizing force, turning schools into D-zones of the imagination. Now, by threatening to strip federal funding from institutions that refuse to conform, this policy functions as an instrument of ideological indoctrination, enforcing a sanitized nationalistic narrative that erases histories of oppression and resistance while deepening a culture of ignorance and compliance. Now, concurrently, President Trump issued the Expanding Educational Freedom and Opportunity for Families executive order, aiming to enhance school choice by redirecting federal funds to support charter schools and voucher programs. Now, this policy enables parents to use public funds for private and religious school tuition, while proponents claim that this legislation empowers parents and fosters competition. In reality, it is a calculated effort to defund and privatize public education. Now, undermining it as a democratizing public good, as part of a broader far-right assault on education, this policy redirects essential resources away from public schools, deepening educational inequality and advancing an agenda that seeks to erode public investment in just and equitable society. Now, in the name of eliminating radical indoctrination in schools, a third executive order which purportedly aims at ending anti-Semitism threatens to deport pro-Palestinian student protesters by revoking their visas, warning that even those legally in the country could be targeted for their political views, in a stark display of authoritarianism. Now, in the raging currents of contemporary political and cultural life, where fascist ideologies are rising, one and for the most insidious and all-encompassing forces at play is the violence of forgetting, a plague of historical amnesia. Now, this phenomenon, which is referred to as organized forgetting, describes the systemic erasure of history and its violent consequences, particularly in the public sphere. Now, this is especially evident in the current historical moment when books are banned in libraries, public schools, and higher education across countries such as the United States, Hungary, India, China, and Russia, ignoring past atrocities, historical injustices, and uncomfortable truths about a society's foundation is not merely an oversight. It constitutes an active form of violence that shapes both our collective consciousness and political realities. What we're witnessing here is an assault by the far right on memory that is inseparable from what Maximilian describes as a battle over power, over who is remembered, who is erased, who is cast aside, and who is forcibly reduced to something less than human. Now, this struggle is not just about history. It is about whose stories are allowed to shape the present and the future. And he captures this reality with striking clarity and is worth quoting as length. Among the prizes at stake in the endless war of politics is history itself. The battle for power is always a battle to determine who gets remembered, how they will be recorded, where and in what forms their memories will be preserved. Now, in this battle, there is no room for neutral parties. Every history and counter-history must fight and scrape the claw and spread and lodge itself in the world, lest it be forgotten or forcibly erased. All history in this sense is the history of empire, a bid for control of that greatest expanse of territory, the past. Now, organized forgetting also helped fuel the resurgence of Donald Trump, as truth and reason are being systematically replaced by lies, corruption, denial, and the weaponization of memory itself. A culture of questioning, critique, and vision is not simply disappearing in the United States. It is actively maligned, disparaged, and replaced by a darkness that, as Ezra Klein observes, is superfine vast, stretching from self-destructive incompetence to muddling incoherence to authoritarian consolidation. Now, this erosion affects institutions of law, civil society, and education, pillars that rely on memory, informed judgment, and evidence to foster historical understanding and civic responsibility. Now, the attack on the common good goes beyond the distractions of an attention economy designed to distort reality. It reflects a deliberate effort to sever the ties between history and meaning. Now, time is reduced to fragmented episodes, stripped of the shared narratives that connect the past, present, and future. Now, this crisis embodies a profound collapse of memory, history, education, and democracy itself. A culture of manufactured ignorance rooted in the rejection of history, facts, and critical thought. Erases accountability for electing a leader who incited insurrection and branded his opponents as enemies from within. Now, such authoritarian policies thrive on historical amnesia, lulling society into passivity, eroding collective memory, and subverting civic agency. Now, this is epitomized by Trump's declaration on Fox and Friends that he would punish schools that teach students accurate U.S. history, including about slavery and racism in the country. The call to silence dangerous memories is inseparable from the violence of state terrorism, a force that censors and dehumanizes dissent, escalating to the punishment, to the trial and imprisonment of truth tellers and critics who dare to hold oppressive power accountable. We have finally come to the end of the video, but what do you, our viewers, have to say about this? Share your thoughts, your views, your contributions as well in the comment section down below. Thank you for always watching, and see you in our next video as we bring you another interesting video.